Hi, I'm excited to welcome you to today's Frontiers breakout session. Over the past 6 months, organizations across the world have faced significant challenges with the move to a remote workforce. No longer can employees walk across the office to ask a question or head up to the 6th floor to brainstorm with marketing on a cross-functional project. This challenge is multiplied at global organizations where thousands of employees across the world need to communicate. Furthermore, the tools and systems that support these employees often don't talk to each other. They silo information away and only create additional barriers to productivity and alignment. During today's panel discussion, you'll hear from executives at major companies who are overcoming some of these barriers by consolidating their people, partners, and systems into one collaboration tool, Slack. Hi, my name's Haley Allen, and I'm a customer success manager here at Slack. You've invested in Slack, and you want to maximize the value that you get from the tool. This is where our customer success team can partner with you. Whether you have 1,000 employees or 400,000 employees, whether you're in a regulated industry or in the startup space, we work with customers across all industries of all sizes. We bring our expertise, our methodology, and our partnership to help you better deliver against your business goals. Whether it's driving day one adoption of Slack or helping you realize value that's anchored in your business objectives and particular business context. During today's discussion, you'll hear from these executives on how they're using Slack and partnering with our customer success team to navigate remote work challenges, consolidate tools, and improve collaboration, both internally and externally. And they're using our enterprise solution to do so. Referred to as Enterprise Grid, we offer a secure enterprise-grade environment, no matter the size or complexity of your organization. It allows you to work with the agility of a small company while tapping into the resources and the shared knowledge of the enterprise. Unlike a single workspace, which you may be familiar with our standard and plus plans, Enterprise Grid offers an interconnected series of workspaces. It allows teams, functions, and offices to stay focused in a workspace while maintaining cross-organizational alignment, transparency, and access to a full company directory. Not only that, our solution extends beyond the walls of your organization. Our channel-based platform helps employees work not only with peers, but with partners, vendors, and contractors. Instead of switching back and forth between email and Slack, all work can be done in a single digital workplace. At the same time, IT admins can manage security and governance from a central place in Slack, with the opportunity to customize at the workspace level as needed. We offer all of the security and governance functionality you'd expect in an enterprise-grade solution. Our industry-leading security program is based on the concept of defense in depth, protecting our organization and your data at every level. We continue to adhere to the most broadly recognized security standards, offer solutions to help you meet your compliance requirements, and employ rigorous measures at the architectural and operational level to keep your data safe. Enterprise Grid powers thousands of companies around the world, no matter the size of the organization, and it is the only tool that can drive alignment across hundreds of thousands of people. These companies are using Slack to create digital workplaces for their organizations. And of course, change this size doesn't come without dedicated efforts. You may find your organization falls somewhere on this chart, from an organic use of the tool where different teams are adopting it on their own, to a purposeful use of the tool where a function like IT or engineering is using it, to an aligned strategy and governance model, and ultimately towards a transformational use of Slack, where Slack truly is the operating system that powers networked teams, connects tools and systems to automate workflows, and archives information so employees can easily find what they're looking for, no matter where they're working. No matter where you are in this chart, Slack's customer success team can partner with you along the journey to offer strategies to help drive adoption, automate processes, and help you use more of the platform. Ultimately, our goal is to help you realize more business value and deliver against your goals. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from the panelists in today's discussion, executives from some of our most successful enterprise organizations. It's my pleasure to welcome Darcie Underhill, a senior customer success manager here at Slack, who will lead today's panel discussion. Darcie, over to you.
Thank you, Haley. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Darcie Underhill, and I'm thrilled to be facilitating today's panel. Let's welcome our panelists to the virtual stage. Now, to kick things off, would each of you please introduce yourselves, share a bit about your role and your organization? Adhir, let's start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Darcie. I'm Adhir Mattu. I'm Chief Information Officer at Marvell Semiconductor. Marvell is a global semiconductor company focused on building essential technology for data infrastructure. So for the audience, what is a data infrastructure? So think of it as a vast wired and wireless networks that connect the globe, massive data centers that store and process information, and newly emerging edge infrastructures such as smart cars, cities, and factories. Specifically, we design and build semiconductor solutions for 5G, automotive, cloud and data centers, and enterprise IT departments like ours.
Great, thank you. Kirsten?
Hi, I'm Kirsten Wolberg. I'm a Chief Technology and Operations Officer at DocuSign. Most people know DocuSign for e-signature and our digital signature offerings, but we have expanded to be the Agreement Cloud company. We're offering solutions through the entire system of agreements. So for preparing agreements, signing agreements, acting on those agreements, and analyzing those agreements. Ultimately, we want to make the world more agreeable.
Fantastic. Lina?
Hi, I'm Lina Hallmer. I'm the CTOO of Bonnier News. Bonnier News is Sweden's largest media house, and we have newspapers, morning, evening newspapers, financial newspapers, business niche verticals, premium magazine brands, and also we cover a large part of Sweden by our local media. And I'm responsible for all the IT and development at Bonnier News.
Great. Thank you, panelists, and welcome. Now, I imagine many of the folks in the audience today are either evaluating Enterprise Grid or are looking for other opportunities to really deepen collaboration within their own teams. It would be helpful to understand your business priorities and how they influenced the evaluation and ultimate selection of Enterprise Grid. Kirsten, let's start with you. Can you talk a bit about the decision to move all 5,000 DocuSign employees onto Enterprise Grid?
Absolutely. The burning platform, kind of the reason we initially started to look at a collaboration solution for DocuSign was our product and engineering organizations were using HipChat by Atlassian. And we, like many other of Atlassian's customers, realized that HipChat was no longer going to be available. And so we started out by thinking about a new solution for our technology organization and quickly realized that one of our broader objectives was to rationalize our applications. And we could take this opportunity to really rationalize probably 5, 6, 7 different collaboration tools we had in different pockets around the organization and really help us on our path to scale and better collaboration across the organization. So I made the decision that we weren't just going to replace HipChat for product and engineering. We were going to roll out a solution across all of DocuSign. So as we started to put together our short list of the different solutions we were going to look at, I thought back to my very first town hall at DocuSign, and I think the second question I got was, when are we going to get Slack? And so there was a real pull in the organization. Lots of our employees had been using Slack at other companies they'd worked at, coming to DocuSign, and were disappointed to not have it. So Slack naturally made it onto the short list as we were evaluating alternatives.
Great. It sounds like consolidating onto one tool that employees really wanted to use was critical in improving collaboration at DocuSign, and not necessarily for just the engineering organization, but for all business units.
Absolutely. We now have sales is our biggest user of Slack. So a solution that was going to be, really predominantly for our engineering organization has turned out to be a tremendous tool across the organization.
That's fantastic. And Adhir, while you and Kirsten operate in very different industries, I believe you also had a mandate to rationalize collaboration tools at Marvell Semiconductor. Can you talk a bit about your top priorities and how the move to enterprise grid really helped you achieve some of those goals?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are primarily an engineering company with more than 10,000 patents and geographically distributed. And particularly in last few years with the acquisitions that Marvell has done, we increased our presence even in the newer sites and regions. So as a CIO, I'm very focused on providing necessary and effective infrastructure for collaboration and productivity tools for the employees. So last year when we finished one of the most recent acquisitions, we realized that we had accumulated like 5 different tools. So there was definitely a need to rationalize and consolidate into one platform. We started with the evaluation. We shortlisted a couple of tools, and Slack was one of the front runners. And now the thing that went in favor of Slack was one of the larger acquisitions that we had done was Cavium, which was about more than actually 1,000 employees. So they were already using Slack. So some of the requirements for us were we wanted to ensure that when we brought in Slack, we could have very high adoption, not only in the engineering, but in the rest of the business functions. Now, for that to happen, it was very important that Slack could integrate with some of the engineering applications like Jira and some of the other tools that our engineers use. And more importantly, we wanted Slack to be able to map out our business areas. Particularly, some of our business units, there are some very stringent security requirements. So it was very clear to us that Enterprise Grid was going to be the platform that could do that. And it was a natural choice for us.
Great. Thank you for that context. I really appreciate it. And now, Lina, can you talk about how the decision to move to Enterprise Grid was informed by structural changes and a desire to really increase agile principles at Bonnier News?
Absolutely. I would say that the past few years, Bonnier News has been on quite a journey of change. We come from being quite separate business units and companies within this within our corporate group, making their own decisions and function quite as separate units. And the past few years, we have made a change in our strategy to collaborate more, to work together, and to use the whole strength of our company. And to do this, we really needed to have a good way of communicating across those smaller business units and companies. And at the same time as this happened, we also were maturing in our agile way of working, meaning that collaboration between the tech department, the editorial departments, and also the sales and marketing departments increased. We started working in cross-functional teams and were in need of collaboration tools between those teams and within those teams. And a lot of those separate companies and business units had actually started using Slack, most of the times in the tech department, but it spread. So when we actually chose to roll out the Enterprise Grid, it was quite well used in a lot of parts of the company. So Slack Enterprise Grid actually made a lot of sense for us when we compared it to our structure in our company and what we wanted to achieve.
I love hearing about that. And it's great to see and hear that there was a lot of organic adoption. And then when you guys decided to move to enterprise grade, it just really helped drive that even further across different business units. I love that you mentioned sales. I know a couple other folks on the panel mentioned that as well. Okay, switching gears. Now that you've made the decision to move to enterprise grid, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your process and strategy for designing the grid itself. As Haley mentioned, enterprise grid is a highly customizable solution, one that can constantly evolve and change as your businesses evolve and change. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the design principles you used for your own grid design and some of the key stakeholders that were involved. Kirsten, I understand DocuSign is highly cross-functional in nature. Can you talk a little bit about how that was reflected in your own grid design and the process it took to get there?
We were really fortunate. Slack was such a great partner through the process. So they came in and did a series of design sessions with us that were really invaluable. And we brought in all the different functions across DocuSign. So it was all of the engineering and product. It was sales, customer success, IT, communications, learning and development, really representation across the entire organization. So these are the teams that have to work together to get product out the door and get projects completed. And we recognized that all of them needed to be able to work together. So as we went through these design sessions, using best practices that Slack has from other companies that they work with, we are not proud. We will take everybody else's best practices and bring them in. And for us, what that meant is we landed on a design that was just a single workspace. So DocuSign Work. We debated this hotly. It was not an easy decision to make, and it wasn't necessarily obvious. Once we did it, and now that we're a year plus into it, it's like, oh, of course, we shouldn't have done anything else. This was the right decision for us because we are such a cross-functional organization. But ultimately, we realized that we didn't want to silo the organization by creating workspaces for each one of the functions. Our goal was to break down the silos between organizations, and to have a single workspace was one way, in principle, that we could start to model the behaviors of better collaboration across the organization. So it's worked out. It was the right decision for us, and it has really worked out. We did end up adding a second workspace, and that's DocuSign Play. We wanted to keep work away from some of the more fun aspects. So maybe I'm a Grinch, but I'm not the dog video, the new mom dog videos, any of those. So that stays in our DocuSign Play space, whereas all of our work is within the DocuSign workspace.
I love that. And I think it's so important that you touched on bringing in leaders from business units across the org into the design process. Ultimately, they are all going to be using this tool, and you want to make sure their voice is heard and how you really set that up for success. And I think that is such a great best practice that we really hope and encourage our customers to think through. And on the other side, I really like that you optimize your grid design to support the behaviors you wanted to encourage, like having that separate social, we call it social at Slack, but basically your play workspace where employees can still feel connected, but feel like they can still get their work done in a way that makes sense to them. I'm not going to take it personally, but I am a new dog mom, and I do often look at the dog channel, as does Haley. So I think it's great that it's a separate place.
Well, but I think the play space is really important now, particularly during COVID, right? So we aren't able to connect in the same ways that we used to connect. So Slack has played an important part, and Slack Play is important for us from a connection perspective on a human level.
Totally agree. And Adhir, I know that you felt Marvell's success was dependent on a grid design that was really set up to reduce barriers to adoption, something that was simple, straightforward, and logical. Can you talk about how you partnered with Slack's success services team to approach this?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was very clear to us, just like for any other system, we wanted to ensure that we deploy the system. We had a very good design. And to Christine's point, it was very important for us that we broke all the silos that would have been there. So so we did partner with Slack services team, which in the hindsight was the right decision for us. So we did a few things. Just like DocuSign, we formed a team, a core team from various functions, including engineering, sales and marketing, G&A functions, IT, and so forth. And the first thing that we did was we ensured that our core team understood Slack, how it works, and the design and various fundamentals and principles. So that was a very important thing. And then as part of our design workshops, one of the key things that we had to make a decision was, how many workspaces do you need? So in that particular session, I decided to not participate because I didn't want to influence anybody with my own thoughts. But when the team came out from that workshop, I was told that we need like 21 workspaces, which sounded so wrong. Because the idea was to break silos, not to create any more silos. So on one hand, we were thinking, well, should we go with one workspace or should we have 20? So what we did was we reached out to some of our contacts in the industry. We did some benchmarking, and one message was coming out very clearly that have a minimum number of workspaces. So that message was not lost. But the decision for us was, should we go with one or should we have few? So in any case, we decided to have few because, like I said earlier, we had some business functions that have some very strict security requirements. And then also I was very happy to note that even if we had few, Slack offers these cross workspace channels that still allows us to connect together. So some of the requirements that we had was we wanted to ensure that our administrative overhead was minimum in the back end when we designed the workspaces. Other requirement for us was that we wanted to ensure that the user experience was very, very high, and also the security was a prime concern for us. So then ultimately we decided to configure our Slack workspaces to map with some of our business verticals, and I really think that was a huge element of our overall successful deployment.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. And I love that you talked about the fact that there was discussions of having 20, 30 workspaces because that aligned to logical groupings of teams. But really best practices, start a little bit smaller, kind of get your head around what Slack is, and then really you can always grow and adopt from there. And so I think the way that you approached it seems like there was really that immediate adoption because it was so clear and understandable to new users on Slack.
Absolutely.
Lina, I understand that Bonnier News is highly matrix in nature, many individual business units and supporting verticals. I also understand that there's a desire to create a more unified media house. Can you talk about how your grid design reflected this?
Well, we had some discussions about how to design our grid, but it came out quite easily that we needed it to reflect the way that we worked. So we have separate workspaces for our business units and smaller companies that are included in our corporate group, and also workspaces for our verticals. And we work a lot with using shared channels. You could be part of several workspaces if you are working both within the tech department and also within some of our brands. You can be part of those workspaces as well. But it's really important since the editorial part is quite independent, depending on which brand or which newspaper you are working for, then it's important for them to have their own workspace where they can collaborate without other interfering, I would say. So it came out quite easy, and I think for us it's not a problem that we have a lot of workspaces because it reflects how our organization works.
That makes total sense. And I think you touched on it, but I'd love to learn a little bit more. Past conversations, you talked about how you leveraged org-wide announcements channels to help really bring together that unified editorial and technical teams. Could you just talk a little bit about how that's been helpful in dispersing information and also kind of building Bonnier culture?
Absolutely. We have one workspace where everybody is a member if you work at Bonnier News. And in this workspace, the management team has their own channels. And also we have channels for information where we send out, almost all the information that you need. We have channels for information spreading channels where our CEO is posting announcements. We have chosen Slack to be our primarily channel of information. So this is where you need to be if you want to get all the information. And we also have channels where we pin HR documents and policies. So we actually use it. We don't have an intranet or something like that. We use Slack for information sharing and also for document sharing.
I love hearing that. Yeah, having Slack as that central location for information and knowledge management is amazing, and one of really the differentiators of Slack. It also is clear that your grid design really supports Bonnier's unique structure in a way that makes sense for you and how you do business. Well, I loved hearing how thoughtful each of you were in how you designed the grid. And I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the strategies for really bringing the grid to life. And I know everyone on this panel has experienced this, and likely folks in the audience, that change management is incredibly important for any sort of major technology rollout. So as leaders within your organizations, what are some of the activities that you think are critical to really having a successful Slack launch? Kirsten, let's start with you. How did you approach a successful org-wide rollout from both a top-down and bottoms-up perspective?
I've had, the opportunity to do a lot of big transformations in my career, and certainly having both that top-down and bottoms-up as part of your implementation is critical. So I was the executive sponsor and champion and cheerleader and roadblock clearer, which was critical. This is a change, and we're asking people to change their behavior, and that's difficult. We also identified champions bottoms up. I talked about the fact that we had people who were clamoring to bring Slack into DocuSign, and they were thrilled to be able to help out as we were doing our rollout. So we had champions across departments, across the globe, making sure that we had the groundswell of excitement, and it wasn't just me being the cheerleader from the top. It was really across the organization. So that was really important. I think how we chose to go live was also important. We chose a big bang approach. And this is kind of counterintuitive to the way a lot of people implement large change, because it's like, wait, what if something goes wrong? It's going to be a really big impact. But as I started to think about it, one of the major benefits to Slack is that you have the ability to collaborate across the organization. If we implemented or went live in a way that was group by group, we would have, the early adopters, the early implementations would have all of the pain of the change, but they wouldn't have the benefit of the full experience. They wouldn't actually be able to collaborate around the organization. And some of those early behaviors are really, really important. So if we were, doing a phased rollout, we might actually be reinforcing behaviors that we were trying to break. So for us, it was important to do a big bang and really implement everyone all at once. Made it riskier, but in our case, it made it far more wildly successful across the organization, which was great. Another thing that we spent a lot of time on was, our operating model. How are we going to use Slack within DocuSign? And we documented all of that, and we used that document as a basis for all of our communications to make sure that we were consistently sending the same messages about how we use Slack within DocuSign and how it was going to help us with our collaboration. I use the word communication. Any change initiative is all about communication. I tell my team, you have to say something 7 times before they're going to remember it. So we went about trying to make sure that we were sending our messages around this go live at least 7 times. So we used every possible communications channel. We used email, we used our intranet, we used Slack, we used carrier pigeon, every possible way we could communicate the benefits of the tool and how we would use it. We partnered with our training and learning organization to make sure that everybody had training to optimize their use, and they could hit the ground running as soon as we went live. I also mentioned our champions. They were there helping make sure everybody was having a smooth and easy experience. And then we also, continued to drip the hints and the tips. So along the way, people would have a continuous learning experience. And we tried to make it fun. We tried to make it really exciting. I introduced that we were going to Slack at our sales kickoff in a big sort of reveal moment. I was wearing a Slack t-shirt and did this kind of big reveal moment with a Slack t-shirt on, sharing that we were going to be implementing Slack. And the crowd went wild, as they say, which was really, really fun. And we did Slack parties and sent out stickers and, trying to make a big deal out of it. And I think all of those things together really did help us have a wildly successful go live and implementation.
That's such a great story about such a successful launch, really adopting a lot of our best practices. I love that you personally wore so many hats throughout that process. And I'm assuming a lot of executives were sharing the same role as well. And I love how you talked about your decision to go forward with a big bang launch. We do have customers that do a more phased approach because it makes sense for their business. But I think ultimately the key here is you need to figure out what makes sense for your team, what behaviors you're trying to influence, and really what's going to get the most traction quickest. And it seems like going all in at once at DocuSign was, the right decision.
It was the right decision for us, but I'm the first to say, we, as you said, we've got 5,000 employees. If we had 100,000 employees, I might have had a different story, but definitely worked for us.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Yes, we have customers of all sizes on enterprise grade, and it's just understanding your business and what's going to work within your own culture and your own team. So I think that's a phenomenal point for the audience. Now, Adhir, I know you made the decision to actually accelerate Slack's launch, given to the move to remote work. And that preparation, similar to what Kirsten had said, was incredibly important. What other things would you advise the audience to think about as they, think about scaling Slack within their own companies?
Yeah, so let me paint a bit of a picture for you. So we procured Slack last year around September, October timeframe, but we were not able to initiate our deployment or implementation until January because we were busy with the 2 acquisitions in parallel, doing all the M&A work, and that's kind of unheard in the semiconductor industry, doing 2 acquisitions in parallel. We were all kind of at the very end of finishing those integration work. So here comes Slack around January, and our timeline was to get at least the phase 1 done by July. And one of the things for us was that when we rolled out Slack, we just didn't want to roll out Slack just for the sake of it, but our intentions were very clear. We wanted our engineering community to really adopt it, for better collaboration and productivity kind of scenarios. So that was front and center in our minds. So a lot of pre-planning, a lot of workshops, design workshops that happened. But as you mentioned, by the time we were in the month of beginning of March, end of February, beginning of March, as COVID came and it's like, okay, we need to now expedite the whole thing. So we got it done by end of March.
Wow.
It was just like Kirsten said, it eventually became a big bang for us as well. Now, in terms of some of the things that we did, so obviously the most important thing is executive sponsorship. So right from our very top, our CEO, he was very supportive and very much behind this project. So this was really, really helpful. And then I recall we were in one of our annual leadership workshops last year, and one of the key things that came out was, like I mentioned earlier, we had 5 different tools. So this became imperative that we need to go to one. So that was a key requirement. Let's go to one and go do it in a most efficient way with a high adoption rates at the end of the day. So from that session, we got about 5 or 6 different leaders from the business who became our champions. So we call them Marvell champions for this project. And we used to meet with them pretty much every other week and review our deployment strategies and so forth. And then we also formed a tactical team deriving folks from various engineering groups and various functional teams, sales and marketing, G&A, who formed like our day-to-day implementation core team, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the real success story comes where we focused a lot on change management, Kirsten said, communication. So our plan was that as we were rolling out, the Slack to various groups, we were rolling it out in waves. Every week, we would roll it out to a few hundred folks, sometimes maybe 1,000 folks, but with a very clear idea that we would first offer a training. A Zoom-based training was offered, and then we would roll it out. So that way, when somebody gets a Slack on their desktop or laptop, they would know what to do with it at least. I'm very happy to mention that more than 60% of our employees received live training, virtual training at least. Now, as I keep saying, high rate of adoption. We set some targets for ourselves because one could feel happy that I rolled out Slack and it's working well and I hear good things. So that's great, but at the same time, you got to measure, because if you don't measure, then you don't know what to improve, as people say, right? So we set a goal for ourselves, and we set kind of a high bar. So we said, at least in the first year, we wanted to get to 70% adoption rate, and that basically means is, how many users are daily active users of Slack in first year itself. So these measurements we review with our e-staff, and we review with our leadership team. And I'm very happy to report that in just a few months, ever since we rolled out, we are already very close to 70% in our engineering community. And this is just the beginning.
Wow, that's amazing. And I just really wanted to reiterate the importance of 2 points. You had mentioned the importance of champions to the success of the launch. And I know Kirsten had mentioned that as well. So I think just understanding that really truly is such a great way to drive organic and natural excitement and engagement about Slack within certain teams. So I just really appreciate that you had called that out and highlighted that. And the second thing I wanted to mention was just your clear adoption goals. I mean, to have a 70% adoption goal within months of launch is fantastic. And the fact that you guys are almost there is amazing. But it really does provide a North Star kind of metric for the team to continuously look at, and also have like clear and informed plans on how to really achieve that target. It just sets really good baselines for everyone and structure to, how do you really want to prioritize activities going forward? Now, Lina, I'd love to get your perspective on what that looks like after launch. So what are maybe 1 or 2 things that you would tell the audience to do to really drive ongoing maturity and support ongoing change?
I would say that one thing that I think is really important is that you have the executive sponsorship in this, that the management team is actually on Slack. If your boss or your CEO or a manager contacts you through Slack, then you better be there to answer. So that really drives everybody to actually use Slack regularly. You need to be there. You need to use it. And one other thing that I think has made us mature in our usage of Slack is that we have several super users among the workspace owners who can actually create bots, manage the naming conventions and stuff like that, to make sure that Slack is moving forward along with the company evolving. So I think it's really important to find the right workspace owners who can actually help with the continuous work in how to improve Slack.
That's great. And it makes me think about how Kirsten was talking about approaching the launch of Slack, both from a top-down and bottoms-up perspective. And you really touched on kind of similar concepts, but from a post-launch champion, right? So having your executive champions in place to really make sure that their teams are engaged within Slack. And then also the champions at a workspace level who are really at the ground helping reinforce best practices. So I love hearing that you're thinking about it from a couple of different ways.
Yeah.
So my final topic aims to really bring this all together. And I'd love to hear reflections from each of you about how you really see value of using Slack across your organization. So not necessarily within a specific business unit or team like tech and dev. So Kirsten, why don't we start with you? How are you really thinking about value at DocuSign?
It's really hard to put a dollar figure on the value of collaboration. We all know it's important. We all know it's essential to be able to scale and grow, but to actually put a dollar figure on it. So I try to think about it in the way of like, so what are some tangible things that we are using Slack for that are helping us and we can measure the benefits of that? Automation is one of them. So we have implemented through a partner, MoveWorks, a ability through Slack to ask and answer level 1 help desk questions. So we are on a path to automate at least 30% of all of our help desk tickets. So this is a hard dollar savings. We are able to grow and scale without having to continually add more and more of our help desk personnel. So that automation is a key for us. We've also been able to automate a lot of our onboarding functions. And that has helped us, particularly in a remote COVID situation. This has been, Slack has been a godsend to be able to automate a lot of those previously in-person activities that we would have had to complete. A second way that we are seeing value is through integrations. And I am actually super, super excited because last week, DocuSign internally, we are still in alpha, launched our DocuSign integration with Slack. So now all of the DocuSigners get to sign documents all within Slack. So we are living in Slack. And Adhir, not that I'm super competitive, but I'm super competitive. We're at 95.7% active users on Slack. So that just tells you how much we really live in this tool. So to have DocuSign now integrated into Slack, obviously we spend a lot of time in DocuSign here. And so that's been a really exciting integration for us. And everybody else will be able to take advantage of that, hopefully in a couple of months when we roll out and go GA on that. But those kinds of integrations are critical for us to, again, be able to automate across the end to end. And, collaboration, we have most of the projects that we do involve at least 3, up to 15 different partners and organizations. So we've got big projects across the organization that we are now able to collaborate on. Like Adhir, we had 2 M&As that were happening at the same time. So it really enabled us to stay on top of that. But also externally. We use Slack Connect, and it helps us within our customer success organization to communicate with customers, and also in all of our vendors. We collaborate with our vendors. So through the purchasing process, all the way through implementation, it's a much more efficient way for us to communicate instead of like emails back and forth. And did you get that? Have you seen that? And we have all of the information around whatever it is we're trying to achieve, all within a Slack channel with our vendors and partners. So it really has been a game changer for us. And I don't think that we would, particularly now, though I think even without COVID, we were seeing the same kinds of adoption and usage rates with Slack. It's become an essential part of how this organization runs and operates, communicates, and collaborates. So I don't have a hard dollar value to give you, but I can say it's a lot.
I love that. It seems like Slack is very much ingrained in the day-to-day lives of DocuSign employees, and that likely won't change when things open back up and folks are back in the office. So that's amazing to hear. And I did love that you gave us additional information both on the quantifiable value to the extent that you could around just automation and you're using your service desk, but then some more qualified value pieces, which is using it for your onboarding, deepening partnerships and integration. So I think you touched on so many amazing pieces of value. So thank you for that. Adhir, I guess I will turn it over to you. How are you thinking about value at Marvell?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy to hear that DocuSign is coming out with an integration with Slack. Awesome. I can't wait to get my hands on that part of the integration. So a couple of things. One, when we were talking with Slack in terms of procurement for the company, one of the things I used to talk about is that, hey, we want this platform to become like a digital workplace hub for us from where employees can do their day-to-day job without going into 10 other different applications. So that's the eventual goal for us, and we just finished rolling out our phase 1 about a month back, and so I'm very, very excited about the future of how we are going to start, use Slack in the company. It's a journey, as you all know, right? One of the things that I mentioned earlier was this adoption rate, 70%. So we set a very high bar for us, because when I looked at the default definition of adoption, which was more of like a weekly definition, I would be 90% too. But we chose a very high bar, which was daily, and then I can provide you all a more detailed definition of how we measure. But the key thing is we want this tool to be pervasive in the company. It already is, even within the phase 1. As our employees started to work from home, we saw a great use of Slack in various scenarios. So, for example, Marvell was getting ready for the company redesign, company brand redesign. And that project, the whole project management, Slack came in very handy for the folks. Our company, as I mentioned earlier, we build and design semiconductor solutions. So it's very crucial that we keep our design and development timelines on schedule. So Slack has been a great tool for our engineering community to keep that going. Our finance team, quarter end process, as you all know, is very crucial for any company's financial team. So Slack was used very effectively and productively to ensure that everybody is working on in lockstep. So there are many examples like that. And yes, we also have a channel dedicated where people post pictures of their cats and dogs. And by the way, that's very important, because during these difficult times, that's one of the things that has kept us connected. But I think most importantly, as I look at the future, as Kirsten mentioned, one of the things that really brings value to this kind of a platform is ability to integrate with some other things. So I'm now looking forward to integrate with some of the engineering tools like Jira, as I mentioned. We are working on integrating with our CRM system. Now that's again going to be awesome, because when our sales staff is going to work on opportunities or design wins, they get notifications via Slack tool. So I think possibilities are really infinite, and I'm like I said, I'm thrilled that DocuSign gets integrated, and I think there are many other tools which company like us uses, which I'm looking forward to integrate. So we really hope to get to very close to 100% in terms of adoption, but so far so good.
Great. And I mean, I just really love hearing the healthy competition for adoption numbers. You make our customer success lives a lot easier when you just do it naturally. So I appreciate that. And I love that you talked, Adhir, about some of just the depth of integrations within the Slack platform and within Enterprise Grid. And that really is such a differentiator for Slack. It makes the tool so sticky for employees, and it really helps just include it in employees' day-to-day lives. And I also love that you were highlighting the value of Slack across your organization. You mentioned the finance team and the marketing team with the rebranding. And I think it's so important to look at some of those less commonly discussed use cases and really bring those to the surface and share with other customers to just show how others can really get the most value out of their Slack instance. Lina, how are you thinking about value at Bonnier News?
Well, I absolutely agree with Kirsten that setting a number on collaboration and communication is really hard, but being able to communicate seamlessly across our company is really important for us to drive our strategy forward of growing our media house to become even bigger. And I think it's really important also when we are doing our M&As to actually being able to quickly integrate new companies into our corporate group to make sure that the new people that are entering our world will be able to just not get all the information, but also get the culture and see all the fun parts and to be able to ask quick questions to whoever they need within all our company. So it's really important for us in our strategy forward as well to just unite our company and also grow it.
Great. Yeah, I think it's interesting that everyone on the panel today has mentioned M&A activities. And I think that's such a strong cross-functional use case to see how Slack can really support acquisitions. And so you briefly touched on it. I'd love to learn a little bit more specifically around how you leveraged Slack Connect for the recent acquisition of Mint Media.
Yeah, we were a pilot customer for Slack Connect, which allowed us to actually early in the process integrate with Mint Media in this acquisition, and it really helped us in this acquisition case. And I think it's we had some shared channels before it was announced, and also we completed a really quick integration process once we actually acquired the company. So everybody was prepared for a Slack communication when we were ready to integrate.
That's great. Yeah, I love hearing all the use cases around Slack Connect and how now more than ever, it's really opening opportunities for multiple companies to really connect and engage with each other in this context through M&A. And I'm sure there are thousands of other use cases out there we could continue to explore as well. So before we wrap, I just wanted to open the floor to the panelists if you have any final thoughts, comments, or favorite Slack hacks for the team.
First of all, I would like to thank our Slack team. They have been really helpful, very knowledgeable, and like I said, when we were rolling out Slack to our company, all the trainings, all the training material that was developed with the help of Slack team, I think that was very useful, and my big thanks and appreciation for the team. Now, in terms of our overall Slack hacks, there are many. I'm not the best user of Slack, to be honest with you, but I can tell you there are many in the company who are much better than I am. And in our company, we have created a specific channel within Slack where people post any issues or anything that they need help with. And if there is any channel that I keep an eye on, just that everybody knows, that's the one. And a lot of times I see there's somebody asking a question, and before anybody from IT jumps in, I see 10 other people jump in and answer the question, which really makes me very happy. I think that's the beauty of Slack. It brings people together. It ensures that people are, it gives employees a platform to help each other out, and that's what you want with this kind of a tool, right?
Yeah, the power of the champion program, right? Self-appointed champions that just want to make Slack a more productive and pleasant space for others.
Yeah, I would say the champions are the secret sauce, and it's the secret sauce for the implementation, but it's also, when we have folks using Adhir inappropriately, we don't have to say anything. The entire champion network just gets on folks. It's like, listen, this is not how you use Adhir. So let's be very, be conscious of how many people are on this channel, be conscious of what this is actually doing. And this is really not very sexy, but I love the Zoom integration. We live in Zoom, and so often you're just slacking back and forth. It's like, let's just, slash Zoom, and then we're like able to actually be talking to each other. And again, I think those kinds of hacks are critical to the connection and the communication during COVID. So it looks like we're going to be working remotely for quite a while. And so these are the lifelines that connect us as humans, which are so important right now.
I would say that one of my favorite things about Slack is that you actually can find people both by name and you can see their pictures, so that you know who you are talking to and you can make sure that it's the right person. So I would say that one of the things that we drive really hard at Bonnie News is that you need to add your personal picture, not an avatar. You need to add a real picture because that helps a lot when actually identifying if this is the right person that you are communicating with.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful point. It just really adds that human element of collaborating and communicating. And we've talked a lot about the move to remote work and being able to still build community and culture using Slack. And I think that's a phenomenal and very easy way to do so within Slack. So thank you for sharing. All right, a huge thank you to our fantastic panelists, Adhir, Kirsten, Lina. Each of your stories is so unique and truly represents how customizable and flexible Enterprise Grid is. And the folks in the audience, what an amazing opportunity to hear how other leaders are really thinking about positioning Slack within their own organizations and how cross-functional collaboration is now more important than ever. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your frontiers.